Hey, it's your buddy Peace and Harmony with you here today. I have a lot of viewers who ask me about borderline females, especially as they relate and kind of correspond to the experience with someone who's more narcissistic or psychopathic. And I want to help shed some light and kind of clarify some of these situations so it can help you deal with these types of people in your own life and further you and your education of people who have personality disorder along that spectrum. Now, the DSM-4R is the diagnostic tool that psychologists and mental health professionals will use to determine and diagnose and treat personality disorders. Now, a lot of people don't really go in for such treatment. That's really a significant issue, is that oftentimes these people, they do not feel like there's anything wrong with them. So in other words, if you don't feel like there's anything wrong with how you're behaving, how you're treating people, you're not going to be apt to go in and seek help. And now the borderline, they say that 75 to 90% of those diagnosed with a borderline personality disorder are females. And that's generally thought to be true because they're the people, the females are the ones who are more apt to go and seek treatment for themselves rather than a male. I mean, a lot of women tend to go get health care before a male does. I mean, I think a lot of men are just raised to, tough it up, rub some dirt on it. You don't go to your doctor. In fact, a lot of guys don't even go to the doctor unless there's something, dire wrong with them. They're very apt to be slow to utilize the healthcare system, whereas women are a little bit more apt to go and get themselves taken care of, get themselves checked out. And likewise, we see that prevalence more so in the female population than the males. So I want to distinguish some of the kind of key characteristics of the borderline and specifically how it presents or how it manifests in people's everyday reactions and their relations, so it can help you kind of fit the pieces together for yourself. Now, with a borderline, the females, these people tend to generally have wide fluctuations in their emotions. Basically it makes them very emotionally unstable. They can be prone to excessive anger outbursts, irrational anger, what they call mood lability, which means they can vacillate, they can change moods very quickly. Very stormy in terms of their personality. So, in other words, they can be happy one minute, watching the news, watching the TV, watching a movie, and the next thing you know, they're pounding at the glass at some sort of squirrel outside or some deer that's coming in, like eating their foliage, and then doggone it, and then they'll just lash into this, kind of like violent, and sort of like aggressive outbursts, and then just go off on that tangent, and and then they'll just continue along that tangent, and then they'll be, very easily upset and irrational, and it'll be, it's very confusing and kind of damaging for people to be witnessed to this, because there is a kind of some issue with how they process emotions and their thought patterns and a lot of their impulsive behaviors. So these people do react very impulsively, and if you're kind of in the stone's throw of them and you are witnessing some of these reactions or experiences, it can be very confusing and very disruptive, because it's just so unstable for the borderline. And part of their diagnosis is they kind of like they teeter between like being kind of in reality kind of normal, and then they'll kind of flip out into what they call an almost, psychotic episode where they're really not in touch with reality. Not to the point where they're like schizophrenic and like they need, medication and like a different living situation. There's some people who have very dysfunctional, but a lot of people do try to function quite well in society, and they try to carry on, but the thing is they don't really feel like there's anything wrong with them. And so this can be very difficult because people will be subject to these violent outbursts and anger, from them. And they say that 6 to 10 million people are afflicted with this. So chances are you've definitely come in contact with a borderline female. And the brain scans do show an impairment in the brain pathways and circuits, basically, you know, the connection within the mind, which does, you know, kind of, you know, travel just like almost like lightning does. So we do have that electrochemical, you know, sort of process in the brain, and also the heart works in a similar manner. There's electricity and energy that's generated, if you will, and there seems to be an issue with their processing, and it affects their perception, their reasoning, and it just really manifests in kind of like, you know, their discretion and poorly disciplined. You know, very, very disruptive in their function and treatment of people, and really kind of at the core of this, which is very different from the narcissist, who builds up really like a lot of supply, and like if you're not available to them, you know, they've already got their, you know, second, third, fourth tier of supply available. So they're not so as prone, I would say, to feelings of or fears of abandonment, where the borderline female definitely is like ultra triggered by feelings of abandonment. You know, if it's real or perceived, abandonment, meaning, you know, somebody, you know, moving in their life or getting ill in their life or changing in their life. And this has huge, really dramatic ramifications, and I'm really going to be looking at this more in depth in future videos, because it's very important for you to understand how these people react, especially in child rearing, especially in relationships, close relationships. It can be hugely, catastrophically detrimental to try to deal with these people, and they can be extremely violent and aggressive and hostile and cause a lot of disarray and disruption when they act impulsively, when their emotions erupt impulsively. And it's they're clinging to this fear of abandonment, which is really underneath it all. The narcissist, whether they're overt narcissist, covert narcissist, you know, the kind of like outlandish personality versus the one who's more toned down, you know, they really, you know, I don't feel that they have like a huge fear of abandonment, because they're very mobile and autonomous, you know, from my understanding and experience, and they're able to move quite quickly, you know, amongst people and rebuild relationships. They really don't like grieve over, you know, people changing. They have that, you know, that love bombing and devaluing and discarding, which they do very rapidly and with quite a bit of ease. The borderline, though, if they perceive that there's going to be a sort of abandonment issue, this triggers them into catapulting into launching a lot of these really idiosyncratic and, you know, what you might see is like outlandish behavior, which, you know, prompts you to feel like, well, I didn't deserve this. You know, why is this person completely overacting? Why are they on edge all the time? You know, why are they always lashing out? Why are they never happy? It can be very frustrating to be dealing with these people, and it tends to really disrupt your life. And in fact, it can really impair others' lives to try to deal with these people on a close basis. But really, their fear of abandonment will cause them to mistreat people, especially those who are most significant or most close to them, that they will project this sort of fear of abandonment onto other people, and they'll be very suspicious. They'll treat people very suspiciously, create a lot of paranoia, which is kind of like coming from, you know, left field. It's like, where is all this suspicion coming from? I mean, they just create this whole phenomenon in their mind, and then it's very disruptive, because what happens is the people end up not being able to live in sort of a focused, you know, manner, and it's very difficult to establish relationships with these people if they're constantly kind of like pushing you away and then like pulling you back. They get more into a process of idealizing and devaluing, like, you know, I mean, they drop you like a hot potato. I mean, it's just like in a moment's notice, right after they've just, you know, had a heart-to-heart, kind of what you feel is kind of they're kind of very superficial heart-to-heart with them, because they're constantly, you know, going between all these different groups and situations, and they really rarely, I find, have a very focused, they have a disability of focusing with people. But realize that when they have this threat of loss of significant other, or this fear of abandonment, that's what launches them into this irrational behavior. And or if they perceive there's a change of structure, or an impending lack of structure, it'll cause them to go into overdrive, where they're then trying to create more structure and just try to control every single situation. That's why you find them belonging to a lot of groups, having a very overscheduled calendar, things of this nature, very intense type of people, and they can be very accomplished in a lot of ways, but it's always on this kind of like overdrive, where they're like needing an oil change. It's just kind of like a hazardous situation when you're around them. And I would say, especially with their loved ones, they're going to inflict this irrational anger constantly, unprovoked, because of a fear of abandonment. I'm going to go more in depth of this in future videos here. I think it's very important to understand if you've either been diagnosed with this, or have a family member who acts like this, because I think your understanding will give you some knowledge and help you put the pieces together so you can better handle it. Peace and harmony with you here today. I hope these videos help. Please share, please subscribe for more great tools, videos, discussions, and support.